Pastor Mai, good afternoon. Welcome to Manx Radio. Today we're talking about the Climate Change Board. Daphne, Caine MHK has been in charge for a while, but earlier on this year, two specialist independent advisors were appointed by the Climate Change Transformation Board, and they're here today. Clive Callister is here and Dave Sowden. So we'll be hearing from Clive and Dave and Daphne Caine about where we are, where we need to get to, how we'll know we are when we get there, how much it's going to cost, and what's it going to mean to you and me. All before 1 o'clock today, text, email, call and WhatsApp. And Daphne Caine, I think, was it last year, September you were last in, wasn't it? So back then. I remember you saying that we're on the road. So where do we get with the £400,000? Was that spent or not spent?
What was the £400,000?
The money that was supposedly in for... Did the Climate Change Transformation Board have a budget back then?
There's £25 million climate fund that was put into the board to look at how we best invest that to make the changes we need to adapt to climate change.
Right. And
much of that is committed but not spent,
right.
So that's been rolled forward again this year. There was £42 million was the headline figure, a little bit more than 400,000, but
okay.
that involves a lot of the flood mitigation work, the flood works that's been carried out by DOI, I think. And in our little fund, that what we're working on allocating and researching is the £25 million. But 80% of that is actually committed to putting money, investment in improving people's homes in the Green Living Grant Scheme and also the Energy Efficiency Scheme.
Can you tell us where the Climate Change Transformation Board sits in government? Is it responsible to? Does it go across departments? Where does it sit? Who does it answer to, first of all?
We're a political board made up of myself as chair and Paul Crane, MLC, as vice chair, and two ministers, Environment Minister Claire Barber and Chris Thomas, as Infrastructure Minister, also sit on the board. And we make the political decisions in terms of the research that we commission in all aspects of our climate journey. So initially we had the energy efficiency scenarios that Arup did back a couple of years ago now, and then that's thrown up a few other areas that we needed more research in. So we've recently commissioned a biomass, biofuel commissioned a survey onto that, and then we've had recently a consultation on bringing forward the fossil fuel ban in terms of new gas or oil boilers being fitted into new properties.
Is the Green Living Grant, is that you?
That's our scheme. The DFE are rolling it out in terms of who's actually doing the day-to-day operating of the scheme, but that was a scheme that was that they developed, they worked up. We identify, I feel like that we look at the whole picture. We set through the Climate Change Act, we have certain statutory requirements that we are obliged to make these changes. The recent 5-year action plan that Tynwald supported, also they adopted the various interim targets. So we need to make really significant changes to bring down our carbon emissions and to bring everybody on the journey with us so that we have climate justice, so nobody gets left behind, and that we have to put in the nudges, the levers, the incentives to try to get people to make that culture shift.
Okay, the Climate Change Annual Progress Report, the Chief Minister going to be presenting to Tynwald, was that all yours? Did you do all that?
That's the team. We have a team of people, thankfully being built back up now. I think we're just up to 8 officers under with the head of climate who are coordinating that work. But we're also appointing officers specifically into other departments to help deliver their climate commitments. So every government department, every local authority has the public body duty to take this action for climate, and we are giving them the tools to help them achieve that. And we're also developing things like a waste strategy we're looking at now, and a transport decarbonisation strategy that's been having a briefing on various research that's been put into that. So we're doing that in partnership with the DOI, the Department of Infrastructure, but we as a board are facilitating the island's journey but we are working actually across most departments, and some are further along that journey than others, because while we're doing this, of course, everyone's got business as usual and delivering services to the public.
Okay, Dave Sowden, what drew you to the Climate Change Transformation Board?
Well, I've been involved in the development of low carbon buildings policy in the UK for well over 20 years, and the opportunity came to my attention that the Isle of Man, with its own statutory commitment on zero carbon, needed to focus on buildings. They had a report commissioned which is published on the DEFRA website about the transition that needs to happen in buildings on the island. And the Climate Change Transformation Board decided to make these two appointments. Open application process. I applied and I got the job.
Okay, you've been doing it for 20 years. To the layperson, what does a low-carbon building actually mean? What does it mean?
At a basic level, it's very simple. It means one that is well insulated, properly draft-proofed with a heating system and lighting systems that operate as efficiently as possible and use the lowest amount of energy.
Okay.
Whilst still maintaining, and this is very important, we're not looking at people wearing hair shirts here, whilst still maintaining proper levels of comfort and safe levels of comfort for people.
Okay, Clive Callister, how did you get on board?
Living here, I was keen to see that the Isle of Man government fulfilled its promises. My background, I spent 8 years in the renewable energy industry, working mostly in wind and wave and solar projects. And before that, many years ago, I worked at MEA, as it was then, when they built the new CCGT power station, and I was the first operations manager in there. So I'm really keen to help, as an advisor to the board, them understand the technical stuff that Manx Utilities are telling them now about their plans going forward.
Okay, I mean, that was a heck of a project when the new Paul Rose was built as well. When does that? What's the end of life for Paul Rose?
There's an official end of life, but a bit like nuclear power stations in the UK. I mean, a lot of those are as old as I am. That's not to say you don't keep changing parts of it and you can extend the life again and again and again. So to be honest, different parts wear out at different rates. I mean, the back end of gas turbines have worn out umpteen times already. The front end's worn out a few times. Steam turbines worn out a couple of times. But you can keep refurbish them and keep going. So realistically, if you really wanted to carry on burning gas, it would be well into the 30s and beyond.
Has Paul Rose, the new Paul Rose, been a good servant to the Isle of Man, do you think?
Yeah, fantastic. Yes, combined with the interconnector cables.
I remember the Sunday afternoon power cuts before.
Yeah, absolutely, that's what I was about to say. We haven't had a touch wood. We haven't had a power cut in 20 odd years, and that's really partly the CCGT power station, partly the interconnector cable to the UK, and how well the guys down there are running the system.
Okay, Julian, hi. You're live with the Climate Change Transformation Board.
Hi, Andy, and hello to Daphne, Clive, and Dave.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. I'd like to ask Daphne, actually. The last time you were on the Mannin line, one of the things that you said was, will we be driving in 10 years? I think you also mentioned that e-scooters would be part of the future plan, and I think you mentioned electric trams. And the other day, when I spoke to Claire Barber, she mentioned rationing. What I'd like to ask you is, what's your vision for the future, not only from 2030, but over to 2050, in terms of how our lives will look like? What's your kind of vision on that? Just
for clarification, what Claire Barber mentioned, I think, was the 4 pillars of sustainability of food on the Isle of Man, and as part of a mitigation strategy, rationing was mentioned, Daphne Caine.
You're talking food rationing there?
Yes, you was.
Yeah.
Just in terms of sustainability of food on the island.
Well, what my vision would be, and the various conversations I've had, I'd say firmly the food policy, food security policy rests with DEFRA, so Claire Barber is the right person to tell you the answers on that. But we are looking at, other things that the Isle of Man can do. So we're looking at where a land management plan, where is best to place sustainable tree planting, where's best to grow crops, where even we might look at biofuels being grown on island. So we are all part of the mix. And I suppose that the criticism has been that the Isle of Man has been very slow to go on this journey. So we've a lot of time to claw back. But our diet, the food miles that food takes, and I think Claire mentioned hydroponics might be in the mix. So what we eat in the future and what people would like to see is going to be probably a bit different from what we are now. But the Isle of Man and the wider world has always adapted to what's available. I don't expect in the next 30 years that we'll be eating insects, if that's something. I mean, I don't know if you've tried them, but I don't think that's for me. I think that a lot of people are reducing the meat that they eat because of health benefits, but I would always much rather source sustainable, really high quality, locally grown, grass-fed meat, dairy and vegetables. I mean, I love going up to Bryrad's on a Saturday morning and getting my veg in Ramsey on the Quay. But we all adapt to the circumstances and to the budgets that we have. New technologies are coming on all the time. We could be seeing locally homegrown strawberries, hydroponics in multi-layered factories. Who knows? But the focus for us at the minute is to work with all those various departments. We commission the studies, we get the data. The Isle of Man has really got not much data that we need. And we work with the other departments. You know, I'm also keen to see Laxey Glen Mill, the flour mill, continue.
Okay, Julian?
What about your vision on our transport, travel and freedom of movement?
You mean, well, how healthy it is? Does Clive want to come in there?
Yes, in my day job, I'm responsible for a company that has a large fleet of trucks and vehicles, and transport is, without a doubt, one of the hardest, issues to crack when it comes to decarbonisation. I think electricity being probably relatively easy, but as a business owner, I'm looking at future fuels, the cost at the moment of electric vehicles, because it's all very well electric cars, but electric trucks are horrendously expensive.
What sort of vehicles does your company have? What size?
Everything up to 40-ton trucks, lots of cars and vans. And the problem at the moment is, it's just not economic. We're all look for the large trucks, battery life and like. So we're all looking with great interest at, future hydrogen technology, fuel cell technology, but they're prohibitively expensive at the moment. So we're all keenly hoping there are breakthroughs.
And I'm actually going on the e-bus that Bus Mannin has got coming over for the TT. So, everybody is exploring the options. But this will be really well informed by sister undertaking for us, the Transport Decarbonisation Study, that in a couple of months they'll be reporting back with the findings, with some scenarios for us to work to that can then inform the policy that we go to in this area. And some of it is behavioural change. So people might, of their own volition, decide that they don't need to be a two-car family, if that was previously. Perhaps they'll have one vehicle, or they'll have an electric vehicle or electric bike. A lot of people I know are getting e-bikes and commuting really happily in them because offices and the business world's changing and installing more showers. So there are so many aspects that we are looking at, and it's obviously in the Isle of Man, we know that the UK is going to have a ban on fossil fuel cars, new production after 2030. So something is going to take that place, and EVs seem to be the possible fill-in for that in the short term.
Okay.
But hopefully hydrogen and other things may be in the future.
Julian?
I noticed that the word ban is used, this 2030 ban on internal combustion engines, which isn't really anything to do with market forces. If something's good, people will walk with their feet. But there's only about 10 million electric vehicles in the whole world so far, despite massive subsidies. If people are not sort of voting with their feet, this almost looks like we're being levered into electric vehicles or e-scooters. But that's not the way it's ever been done before. And if you're talking about hydrogen, well, that's going to be an internal combustion engine. So if they're banned already, how will that work?
So I think with obviously the point about the hydrogen engine is it's zero emissions. So although it is an engine, yes. I think
First of all, Clive, hydrogen's a tiny molecule. How are they going to make it safe?
Yes.
In a big truck?
So there are not only the traditional way of storing hydrogen, compressed in a canister, but there's a lot of research going into them, hydrogen being stored in like metal solids, if you like, and it's interspersed between the cells in metal solids. So there's much safer methods of doing it, but it's there's big problems at the moment, without a doubt. That's why we don't see them around very often, and the demonstration vehicles are very expensive. But coming back to Julian's question, it's quite common that government uses legal reasons to manipulate markets and, either stimuli or bans or pulling other levers to make changes through society, don't they? I mean, rewarding renewables in the early days of it and giving big subsidies, but also forcing electricity companies in the UK to make changes in certain percentage of their output and their investment in renewables. So it's quite common that government has to do these things when it perhaps thinks society isn't moving fast enough.
And we have to do this because the climate change that is already evident is having a massive impact on people and communities, and we are contributing in our carbon emissions, which are actually quite high on an averaged headcount basis. We need to bring down our carbon emissions, and the top 3 emitters on the island are energy generation, home heating and transport.
Okay, final word, Julian.
Yeah, when you say about subsidising and pushing us into electric vehicles, we had petrol cars at one time, and then we were told, oh, well, they're no good, we should go to diesel. And now everyone's bought diesel, and now diesel's more expensive, and now we're being told, well, electric vehicles are next. So what's to say in some years' time that electric vehicles are found, I don't know, maybe that you need several thousand years' worth of lithium and we can't get it anymore, so we'll be turfed out of those. Okay,
all right, Julian, we'll leave that there. I just want to go to I think, underlying what Julian was talking about, Daphne, Caine, and you mentioned the word behavioural change. And when politicians talk about behavioural change, some people bristle. Some people say it's no business of politicians to tell us what to do in that circumstance.
Absolutely. But when you have the geopolitics that says suddenly the gas that we need to fire up our CCGT power station to fuel people's boilers in their own home, when suddenly that doubles or trebles in price, there is a massive economic impact, and still people need to go out and about their daily lives, whether it's petrol or diesel costs. So all I can say is I equally get a clamour from people that the Isle of Man is not adapting quickly enough. I've had an electric car now for nearly 3 years. My former family car, it was petrol and then diesel, and that was £300 a month at least for about the 10 to 11,000 miles a year that I do. From £300 a month, my total year is round about £660 now, and I only recharge it on the public chargers. So it's been great. Not only that, it's not polluting the atmosphere. I feel better when I'm driving around in it. The servicing bills have been much lower. So yes, the initial cost has been higher, and it's how we get people to come on that journey. But 3 or 4 years in, second-hand electric cars are now coming in at pretty much the level of second-hand ICE vehicles.
Okay, one of the members of the board is Dave Sowden, and you mentioned, and I'm glad you mentioned it, because you said we don't want everybody to wear hair shirts. So a lot of the talk about decarbonising or going green in the future seems to intimate that we've got a struggle in the future, that it will cost a lot of money to do this. So will a green future, will a lower carbon future, will it be pleasant? Will it be affluent?
Absolutely. The research evidence now from where we're seeing transition to low carbon heating elsewhere in the world, and indeed there's work that's been done specifically for the Isle of Man, suggests that by moving to lower carbon heating systems in particular, if we consider not just the upfront cost, where today's technology does tend to be more expensive, so a heat pump costs more than a boiler, that's recognised. But once you build in the running costs, once you build in the servicing costs, and once you look at the total lifetime cost picture, and you also look at what else the island would have to do to decarbonise if we didn't do that, so you factor in the next the next more expensive thing to do. So, for example, if people don't decarbonise in their homes, and you've got to do more on transport, you've got to do more on power generation, then that journey to a low carbon future for the island, low carbon home heating in its lifetime costs and its overall societal costs is the lowest cost outcome for the island overall. And there are several reports that have crunched the numbers on this, which conclude that, and they're published by the department as well, so people can go and look and see for themselves.
Okay, Howard, good afternoon. You're live with the Climate Change Transformation Board, Howard.
Good afternoon, Andy. Good afternoon to the panel. One question that, it always comes to mind, the push for the finishing off petrol and diesel vehicles. Now, there are an awful lot of people. Let's just keep this in the Isle of Man perspective. Forget the UK at the moment, although they are introducing this, that vehicles of that ilk will be banned from 2030 onwards. But there's an awful lot of houses on the island, private houses and what we term today as social housing, who do not have the ability to fit the fast charging points to their houses. Now, let's just take either Williston, Annika, Pulrose. All those houses do not have dedicated parking. And you're going to have a major disruption to put in the cables and the charging points, and they would have to be dedicated to one particular household. What provision has the government, I'm not talking about the climate change panel, etc., what provision has the Manx government put in place to provide the likes of this after they're banning the purchase of new petrol diesel vehicles?
Well, hello, Howard, and thanks for the question, because that is something that a lot of people wanting to know. I can say that I travel regularly 1,000 miles a month or just under, and I do not have a charger at home. I don't even plug it in at home, and I survive on the 2-hour charging points. We have been having discussion with the infrastructure minister over the provision of public chargers, putting a number in at the hospital. There is a fast charger at the sea terminal, for instance, but there are many more chargers appearing along Douglas Promenade. The feedback I'm getting at the minute is to enable more people in the apartments there and in terraced housing, for instance, to be able to charge their vehicle, that we don't want it to be on a 2-hour limit 24 hours a day, which it isn't. If you go down to Laxey, you can spend half a day in Laxey and charge quite happily by the fire station. So that's into the mix. But I said we've just commissioned a big piece of research on the transport decarbonisation scenarios, and this will be amongst the recommendations that hopefully will be coming forward from that report later this year.
Okay, Howard?
No, you've got a time-limiting factor where the vehicles are going to be banned from sale. And you now have, I'd say, 7 to 8 years in which to make a huge delivery of charging points, fast charging points. And I wouldn't want to have to go into town and sit down there for 2 hours while my car charges.
So do you think the government needs to flood the Isle of Man with chargers, Howard?
They do. I think I've got more sockets in my house here than what is on the island at the moment for charging electric vehicles. And you see them, I have seen them down there on the promenade. And what about visiting cars coming over that are going to be parking and charging in these places? This is going to be a major problem. It's like when they introduced cars onto the island, no petrol stations. Then one popped up, so everybody would have to go to that. Now, I don't think the government have thought this out. And it's going to be a major problem when these cars and vehicles are phased out, and people are not going to be able to charge their cars as they wish.
Well, can I take that? Because obviously I have had the issue that I don't charge at home. The Isle of Man is very well provisioned by Manx Utilities, keeping track that for every 10 electric vehicles there is a public charging point available. So we've got just over 1,000 EVs now registered on the island, and we've got 113 public charging points. And you said, there wasn't a petrol station when the cars started appearing on the island. Well, it's a transition period. We are building up the capacity, and even when they are setting up a couple of chargers to be available, there is capacity for a couple more to appear in the same or further along the road when that's needed. And yes, we are considering it, obviously, because for the short and medium term, it seems that EVs are going to be, for the domestic user, a consideration. And you don't need to sit for 2 hours in the car. In fact, you'd bring your car in and you'd put it on the charge for 2 hours while you went shopping, and then your car would be charged to get you home. The Isle of Man, because of its size, is actually really suited for small, low mileage journeys.
Okay. Are you considering getting an electric vehicle, Howard?
I wouldn't dream of it. I'm quite happy with the car I've got. But Toyota, if you read the papers and read the news, etc., they are coming out of the EV market and progressing rather rapidly in hydrogen. Has the government on the island here had any thoughts of hydrogen for refillable?
Yes, absolutely. As I said before, they're looking at all technologies. Talking to my colleagues in Manx Utilities, and the Department of Infrastructure, every option is still on the table. And I think it's the classic situation in the Isle of Man is we often follow a little bit behind the UK and other places and take the learning from those places, and realistically, it's the same with future technologies for vehicles. I think we'll take whatever's best.
There's also the possibility in the future of having a smart grid, so you'll have your vehicle at home, and when you don't need it, the power can be taken from that to fed through on the national grid, and then it can be charging overnight when there isn't such a high demand for electricity.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Howard.
Okay, thanks.
All right, good to hear from you. We're with the Climate Change Transformation Board today. Clive Callister is here, Dave Sowden and Daphne Caine, MHK. And if you want to get in touch, text, email. I've got lots of text to get to. Text, email, call and WhatsApp through till 1.
At ShopRite, a big slice of our range is continually priced to match or better other supermarkets. We call it Price Match Plus, the plus being what others simply don't match. Like ShopRite Savers, low prices, choice and value you won't get elsewhere. With brands like Sainsbury's and no need to travel miles. Plus, the difference being locally owned makes. We're loyal supporters of local food producers and businesses and benefit the Manx economy directly. ShopRite, proudly locally owned.
Give your home a facelift with Manx Glass and Glazing. Whether choosing aluminium or UPVC in traditional or contemporary styles, you can be sure of excellent workmanship and guarantees. Members of Construction Isle of Man and family run for over 30 years, Manx Glass and Glazing are committed to the local community, and they invest in future generations through their apprenticeship scheme. Visit the impressive showroom on Snugborough Trading Estate. Trust Manx Glass and Glazing, quality and style since 1986.
Got a nice motor to sell? Come and see us.
We are number one. We are family run. Mike's Motors. Mike's Motors.
At Mike's Motors, we don't just sell nice motors, we buy them too. So if you have a nice camper van, motorhome, car, van or commercial vehicle, we'd love to take a look at it. And if we like it, we'll make you a nice offer. Get in touch, visit mikesmotors.im or call 823 200.
Mike's Motors.
That's 823 200.
Ellen Mannin Fuels promotes road safety and would like to thank their customers for their understanding about restricted access and deliveries on and around the TT course during this year's festival. Safety first with Ellen Mannin Fuels.
Who's the king? Work it out and you could win an amazing prize from the King Spa in Onken. From Monday to Friday, we're celebrating the King Spa's 5th birthday in style, with some great prizes to be won. Check out the image on manxradio.com and fill in the competition entry form to get into the draw. Then be listening at 5 p.m. on Friday to see if you're our weekly winner. Don't miss your chance to be treated like royalty. Who's the king? Every weekday with the King Spa Onken and your nation station, Manx Radio.
This is the Isle of Man talking, the Mannin Line.
Well, we're talking to the Climate Change Transformation Board today, and their annual progress report will be presented to Tynwald next month. It's a chunky 35 pages looking at electricity, buildings, transport, agriculture, land and sea, business and waste, adaptation and resilience, fair change, leading by example, investing in our future, and engagement awareness. And we're with 3 members of that panel today. Daphne Caine, MHK, Clive Callister and Dave Sowden. And next, Bonzo, you're live with the Climate Change Transformation people.
Yeah, hello, Andy, and hello, Daphne, and others of the Climate Change Transformation Board.
Faster, Bonzo.
Faster, indeed. Yes, we hear often that people talk about our legislation on climate action, and how we're a small place and why are we doing it and we can't have any influence. But of course, the thing is that the Isle of Man has a global influence because it not only is a global financial centre, of course, has a global shipping and aircraft registry. Now, I was hearing Tim Johnston in the Keys yesterday talking about, I think answering a question from David Ashford, I think was it, about reduction in the number of aircraft in the aircraft registry particularly. And one of the things that he mentioned on that was that politically the problem of business jets has become a big issue, and companies are trimming them back because it's become socially and politically unacceptable almost. Indeed, the big global business jet show that they have in Geneva every year this week, I think they've had protesters there chaining themselves to business jets and generally stating the fact that business jets, although they are, I think, 4% of all of all commercial aviation, they produce 20% of all emissions. So, what kind of measures are Climate Change Transformation Board really pressing for, both in the aircraft, well, particularly in the aircraft, but also in the shipping registry, to reduce emissions so that we can have that broader influence which we're capable of doing on climate action?
Thank you, Bonzo. Well, as you heard, I think Mr. Johnston also made reference to the fact that on the shipping register, they have a special green tariff for particularly low carbon emitting ships that are registered. So there is a climate advantage, I suppose, business advantage for demonstrating climate credentials. The Isle of Man won't do that in isolation. I've been reading lots of exciting research, in fact, that says the future aviation fuel, there's been a lot of research replacing it. Obviously, airline companies particularly invested in that, and that the short-haul journeys could benefit from this sooner than the long haul because of the ability for shorter journeys to be made in such fuel. But I'd say we're also fortunate that we've got the big new ferry, Manxman, coming, and they've made certain arrangements that can be replaced with I don't know if it's synthetic fuel or modern fuels, lower emission fuels in the future. So the Isle of Man is always, and I think every single business is making its own, under the ESG commitments, their own decisions in terms of how they travel, how often they travel, and in fact virtual meetings, people meeting wherever they happen to live rather than always travelling to meetings.
Okay, all right. Bonzo, just one quick word for you. And as is often mentioned, that the Isle of Man, we're a blip in terms of emissions to the world. So just why do you think we have to state our case and present our credentials in this manner?
Well, because of our aircraft and shipbuilding registries, our shipping registries, we're not a blip. we're a damn sight more than a blip. And yes, there are sort of green incentives for our shipping registry, but not, it seems, from what I can understand anyway, for the aviation registry. And so I think this is very much a selling point for our aviation registry, if it could be very quickly implemented, that we are a green aviation registry.
Okay, all right.
We provide incentives for the global business jet or indeed commercial jet market to adopt.
All right, appreciate your call. Thanks, Bonzo. Good to hear from you.
Okay.
All right, I want to go back to Dave Sowden, a member of the Climate Change Transformation Board. You've been involved in, I'm trying to think, it's the Sustainable Energy Association, is that right?
Well, I founded it. It's run by a different CEO now, but yeah.
Okay, we've been talking a lot about low carbon buildings and what have you, and at the end of this nexus is the builder, the person who's building this. Have you met with Manx builders?
I have. In fact, yesterday morning I had a meeting with Construction Isle of Man, or representatives from Construction Isle of Man. I won't name names, but large contractors, and particularly those involved in rolling out low carbon heating. Yeah. And I think one thing that is faced probably everywhere, the UK has the same problem, is that there is at the moment not enough trained installers, particularly in low carbon applications of heating and heat pumps in particular. And there are a lot of initiatives in the pipeline to solve that. And for example, what the Isle of Man government has under consideration right now is options for considering whether in the short term we should continue to do what we've been doing for some years, which is sending installers over to the UK to get trained on things like solar and heat pumps, or whether we are now at the stage where on-island training facilities might be justified. And in fact, an acquaintance of mine came over and he's met with the is it the Department for Education? Met with Desk yesterday to write down in the details of what sort of training facilities might be required for heat pumps and solar PV, where they might be located, how much floor space is needed, what kind of access is needed to get rigs in to train installers on island and so on.
Would that be a simple thing to do? If the facilities were provided, we could train our own installers on the Isle of Man and have almost an education facility for them.
Yes, absolutely. And the same gentleman who has come over here for those discussions this week has made exactly that happen over in Jersey. So now Jersey has on-island training facilities in tech colleges with experienced trainers from the UK, not just going over to Jersey to do the training, but training trainers on Jersey itself. So we're exploring whether that model can be copied for the Isle of Man and investigating it at a feasibility level. OK,
we're with the Climate Change Transformation Board on Mannin Line through till 1 at 17 minutes before now.
Oh, problems with your spine and posture can have a serious effect on your quality of life, but a Line for Life spine clinic could help. If you're suffering from back pain, neck pain, headaches, their holistic scientific approach could find and treat the root cause of the problem for long-lasting relief. Touch A Line for Life now or call 629 444. A Line for Life, the island's spine and posture clinic, here to make life better.
Are you concerned about your eye health? Holmes & Davidson Opticians in Douglas are proud to offer the Eidon ultra-wide-field retinal imaging and Heidelberg 4D OCT systems, state-of-the-art machines that allow early detection and management of eye diseases. Don't wait. Book your appointment today and ensure the health of your eyes with the best technology available. Call 676 230 or visit holmesanddavidsonopticians.co.uk now.
Construction waste today.
Tells recycle for another day.
A builder skip or two.
Tells skips will bring to you.
At Tells Skip Hire and Waste Disposal in Snugborough, you only pay for the waste you bring. For waste disposal and skips, give us a call on 677 137. That's 677 137. Visit Tells today or find Tells Limited on Facebook.
Call Tells Skips today.
677 137.
At Paradise and Gale, you'll always find a stylish selection of furniture for every room. And with exciting new arrivals, now's the perfect time to freshen up your home. And you can have it right now. We've doubled our warehouse space, so even more of our stunning furniture and beds are available for free and immediate delivery than ever before. From living room, dining room and bedroom to home office and more. Come and see for yourself. Paradise and Gale. You'll love our furniture, you'll love our prices.
Sport has a new home on social media for Manx Radio, where you can keep up to date with all the latest sporting action on the Isle of Man. Our new dedicated Manx Radio Sports Facebook page is now live, bringing you all the latest sports news and features. So whether it's motorsport, FC Isle of Man, Manx football, rugby, hockey and much more besides. Make sure to like and follow Manx Radio Sport on Facebook for all the latest updates. On air and online, this is your home for sport on Ireland, the nation station, Manx Radio.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
And with Clive Callister and Dave Sowden and Daphne Caine from the Climate Change Transformation Board today. And Juan's with us. Hi, Juan.
Hey, afternoon, Andy. Good afternoon, Dave and Clive. Good afternoon, Daphne.
Good afternoon,
How are you?
Yeah, we're ready to hear what you have to say.
I'm sure you are.
Yeah, just listening. I've jotting a few points down there, more than what we're going to get into this little short period. But you mentioned they're slow to go on the journey, and I don't think that's a bad thing, because you should be able to pick up on the mistakes that's being made everywhere else, and hopefully that the board and the government will make the right moves. I was listening to Dave and Clive, your background there. Thank you for giving us that. It was something I was going to ask. I'm interested on your renewables, Clive, and what you had to say there. I think the common sense stuff that you're talking about insulating houses and all that kind of stuff is great. That's common sense. That's a way forward. Where you start losing people is the bigger picture of the wind turbines and all the other stuff, 59 wind turbines, which we've seen the pictures of, are supposed to be going down through the middle of the island. And the stuff which, it contras everything that you're saying now, the culling of the birds with the wildlife, the aesthetics of it, the ecology for the seabed, the tons of concrete that's going to be poured into the land and the seabeds. And that's beside the main point, which is the surge loads and the base loads to cope with this. Now, going by what Howard said before about the amount of charging points, I mean, obviously, the more cars that you have that switch over to EVs is the more charging points you're going to have. And I can't see that this is working out at the moment. With the base loads that you're going to have from this stuff. So surely you've got to have the likes of the Kroger being looked at for the transition of the gas transition fuel, and also the geothermal, which doesn't seem to be getting any headway. But I would hope that the government would look at these things to go forward with.
Okay, let's take one at a time. Clive Callister on the base load.
Okay, yes, thank you. So Manx Utilities, with some very clever consultants, have been doing studies looking at the island's load today, future predictions of the load, and looking at the different technologies and where we should go. Wind turbines are obviously one of the lowest cost forms of low carbon electricity, and yes, they are intermittent, and you do need some other form of base load for the occasions when the wind doesn't blow or the sun doesn't shine. But what we, the well-known technologies, and what we're very good at doing is modelling what the combination of those things need to be, and that's what the Isle of Man has been doing, and that's why the government has now committed to at least 20 megawatts of onshore wind in the near future. That will not be 59 turbines down the middle of the island, no chance. What it will be is some turbines in the right place, following all the right assessments, and every project like that has to go through a full set of environmental impact assessments, which looks at everything from the impact on birds and bats and the environment and landscape and visual impact as well, because let's be honest, people will see these wind turbines and there is an impact associated with that. But on the other side of that, there's an urgent national need and a worldwide need to decarbonise.
I'm just going to ask you that. But when you talk about planning, we're talking about planning process on the Isle of Man.
Yes.
That can take decades.
So I believe one of the things the government has also got on its agenda is a national policy directive to steer the planning officers when they consider planning applications for wind. And I believe government has committed that the 20 megawatts will be probably on its own land in its own estate, and we all know pretty much where that is. So, that's a fact. If I can just quickly pick up on the geothermal before we move on. Yes, we all know what geothermal is, and in some parts of the world, we see in Iceland and places like this that it's cheap and it's free, almost free, and it's very common. But it's not a well-established technology in the UK. There are some big research projects going on at the moment, such as the one down in Cornwall, the United Downs Deep Geothermal Power Project. That's been going for 10, 15 years, and it still hasn't it's drilled the wells, but it still hasn't put the power station on. That's supposed to be happening this year. Again, I think the Isle of Man's best position is really to watch what happens there, and if the technology proves to be commercial, then...
You don't think that it would be worth throwing, I don't know how much it would cost, whether it would cost six figures, £100,000 to put an experimental geothermal in there. I mean, the public would say, look, we spent nearly £5 million on getting rid of a medical director recently. We're £40 million over budget with the sea terminal in Liverpool. Surely throwing six figures at finding whether geothermal may be a better bet.
We should be doing at some point a feasibility study. The drilling wells down 5 kilometres is at least times 2 is not six figures. It's a lot more than that.
Right.
And you need to understand the geology and all the other things first, whether that's suitable for what we've got here on the island, and that is let's wait and see what happens in other places, and work out whether it's the right thing for us to do.
Okay, Ewan?
Yeah, I agree with some of your points there. One point that you did bring up there was the geothermal is very, very cheap and free. That might be a consideration of
where it works. It's cheap and free.
Well, that might be a consideration of why it's not getting explored. And now I could go on with quite a lot of lists there of different stuff. I noticed as well, France this morning has just banned short-haul domestic flights. And there's a lot of stuff I could sword fence with you guys and Daphne. And I asked this question. I mean, we're talking now of massive changes here. A great reset, which has been born out of COVID, basically, or reborn. We're going to change our lives. And interesting that Claire and Chris is on your same committee, who also have big agendas in this with their own departments for changing our lives and the way that we're going to live. Would it be possible then, or an open invitation to you guys to sit down in an open forum with people on another table, with the Manx public, so they can air their views and actually see where this is going and make their expressions of interest and points? Because you're talking about all of us here, every man, woman and child, making massive changes in their lives for this supposed climate emergency. But yet, we've still got people who are spending multi-millions of pounds on properties and stuff on supposed areas that's going to be flooded in so many years' time. But
Ewan, I mean, a couple of years ago when the general election was happening, I sat with every candidate in all constituencies, and the first thing that every candidate mentioned was green issues. I think the only person who didn't put green issues at the top was Stu Peters. Out of all the candidates, they were like Robin Hood's men. They were covered in green.
Yes, and
And the voters knew that.
And a little bit like, let's say, what we could say like the COVIDs, people change their mind on what they originally thought because new information comes about.
Okay. All right, Joan, I've got to dash on because we've got some more people just lining up, if that's okay.
That's fine, but I open invitation there to the guys to have an open forum somewhere so the people can discuss it with them.
Okay, thanks for that today. Good to hear from you. David, you're live with the Climate Change Transformation Board.
Hi, Randy. You corrected yourself anyway about the 42 million. I hope the report comes out before Tim has the breakdown, how much we've spent already, and I presume the panel will confirm that. That's a yes.
It's the amount spent on both of those, the Energy Efficiency Scheme and the Green Living Grant Scheme. You can find the latest amounts on the website, but there's much more allocated than spent. So we are having discussions about what the future support schemes might look like now.
Okay, it'd be interesting to find out what you've allocated to, which we don't know, or unless you would tell us, but maybe not today.
It is public.
The most interesting bit from your panel is the guy that was on a little bit earlier and said about training. That's an absolute plus. If we haven't got the skills for the people that are on the island, where the education minister was sending guys off to do gas courses and oil courses to get accreditation to be complying with the law. I just think they've missed a trick there, and I can just ask the panel quickly on that, and I'll disappear. One of the biggest landlords on the island is the Isle of Man government, whether that's with local housing and then big corporate buildings, the number of schools on the island, which are shut all the time over the summer. Why aren't we looking to put some sort of energy efficient PV panels on that, solar there, to pick up the water side of it. And when they're not getting used, they're thrown onto the grid.
Okay, all right. So why isn't the government walking the walk instead of just talking the talk?
Well, I think in many areas it is. I mean, I met Douglas City Council yesterday to talk about some housing projects that they've got in train. They're refurbishing a substantial social housing estate with Williston. They're doing a refurbishment project at Williston where they're taking some quite old housing and they're doing a major, quite deep energy efficiency refurbishment of that to improve the future fuel bills of their social landlords. I mean, I have seen business cases put forward for solar panels being put on schools. I think in some instances we have to look at those projects in the context of what is needed overall and where it's needed, which is Clive's area of expertise on what should be injected into the electricity grid and where. But we are engaging with industry on all of this. We're engaging with the public sector on all of this, and we're certainly engaging with Manx Utilities in investigating the art of the possible. Both of us are.
Okay, thanks for being with us today. And I didn't get to one of the most important questions today, which was to Clive Callister, who was involved in getting ocean wave technology involved in Western Australia. I wanted to talk to him, but we didn't have time. So hopefully back between now and Christmas for the Climate Change Transformation Board. You've been listening to Clive Callister, Dave Sowden and Daphne Caine. And back tomorrow with an open line. Don't forget, next Tuesday, Gary Cobb from the airport and Chris Thomas.
WINT. Right. I say, when you're looking for the